The probe into possible Russia collusion between Russian officials and the Trump administration continues. And if you are following the story at all, you know that there are many lawyers involved. In fact, lawyers have lawyers in this case, and it is insane. And so the recent update on this whole issue has to do with the lawyers feuding with one another and disagreeing with how to proceed with requests for documents and cooperation in order for the special counsel to complete its investigation. Now, interestingly enough, Ty Cobb, who is one of the White House lawyers involved in this case, was at a steakhouse in DC that's well known for its appeal to New York Times reporters. Usually New York Times reporters are there, they're eating, they're talking. And so if you're going to have a steak there, or if you're going to have a meeting there, it's probably best to not discuss confidential information or confidential issues within the White House. But that's what Ty Cobb did. He was there with John Dowd, who is Trump's personal attorney. And there were New York Times reporters present. They did overhear parts of that conversation, and we're gonna give you the details right now. Now, Cobb has argued for turning over as many of the emails and documents requested by the special counsel as possible in hopes of quickly ending the investigation, or at least its focus on Mr. Trump. Apparently, Ty Cobb's take on how to proceed is very different from Donald McGahn, who is another one of the lawyers who actually wants to keep a tighter grip on these documents. So the White House counsel's office is being very conservative with this stuff, Ty Cobb was overheard saying. Our view is we're not hiding anything. Referring to Mr. McGahn, he added, he's got a couple documents locked in a safe. Mr. McGahn supports cooperation, but has expressed worry about setting a precedent that would weaken the White House long after Mr. Trump's tenure is over. Now, I find it super strange that Ty Cobb would have this open conversation at an establishment that everyone knows is,
it's like a clubhouse for the New York Times.
Right, so yeah. He knew that. And the fact that he's loudly talking about what's going on, in regard to this investigation and the disagreements among the lawyers is really strange to me.
You think it's like a deliberate leak?
Well, if you saw it in a movie, you wouldn't believe it. That would never happen.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, it would be too over the top to force something like that.
But what possible benefit is there in leaking what is an argument over how forthcoming they should be?
Well, because when White Houses fracture, you want to get press support for one side. Because once the wave of support goes to one side within the White House, it banishes the other side. And he seems to think that this is exactly how that they should listen to what he has to say, not what Don McGahn has to say in this case. And so if you get a tide of pressure of popular pressure behind it, it could work in their favor. I mean, it's really small inside baseball with Ty Cobb, but it's inside baseball. But it's important enough to the White House that this is tearing them apart right now, and Ken Vogel has said that. I mean, in his writing, that they are really divided on this, and this is going to be the what either floats or doesn't float this administration. So it's very, very serious at the same time.
Right, and also keep in mind that Ty Cobb was also sitting in the outdoor seating area of the steakhouse where everyone walking by can see him. Like it just seemed, and by the way, this is speculation. This is based on my perception of what went on, but it seems as though he was deliberately having this discussion, knowing that there were reporters nearby, listening in on what he had to say. It's absurd.
Well, first of all, I love our graphic. Big mistake.
Yeah.
But EAK. But
By the way, to have Ty Cobb in the story and not go with the baseball banner, I think that's pretty impressive. I mean, kudos to anyone who was behind that because it's so easy to,
Yeah, you're right. You have to lay off a lot of baseball references when somebody's named Ty Cobb in the story. But why not? I mean, again, just to push back on you guys, why not? Leak everything the way you've leaked everything else. I mean, I always feel as though there's a certain elegance being ascribed to this administration in terms of everything they do strategically that doesn't exist. There's been nothing elegant about this crew since the beginning. Trump and his henchmen they have these poor ways of doing things, everything from policy to staffing. And even when it comes to release of information, they're usually at odds. The president's tweeting one thing, and then a spokesperson has to correct it. So I just feel as though this is way too I understand you could say, well, this is pretty clunky too. They're going to a steakhouse and speaking up and kind of a stage whisper to New York Times reporters. But still, it strikes me as, why not just leak it the way they've leaked everything else?
Because Ty Cobb was brought in to do something different. He's not. Don McGahn's been with Donald Trump now throughout the campaign since the genesis of this White House, and Ty Cobb hasn't. Now Ty Cobb's there, and he wants to do things differently because they're scared. Things have not gone well, and this investigation is serious. And
so
it's spreading.
We're going to go to delis all over DC and steakhouses releasing information.
The way to do it, that's inelegant too. I mean, there's
yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think anyone's making the case that this was an elegant way of leaking anything. Yeah. But again, I don't think that Ty Cobb is a stupid person. Like, I think he knew what he was doing, and you're in a place where you have reporters all around you. You're speaking about something incredibly sensitive. Just to give you a sense of what else was overheard during this conversation between Cobb and Dowd. According to the New York Times, Mr. Cobb was heard talking about a White House lawyer he deemed a McGahn spy, and saying Mr. McGahn had a couple documents locked in a safe that he seemed to suggest he wanted access to. He also mentioned a colleague whom he blamed for some of their earlier leaks and who he said tried to push Jared, as in Jared Kushner, out. So look, I think more than anything, this continues the theme of infighting within the White House. Now you have lawyers, disagreeing with one another, arguing with one another, and doing so in an incredibly public fashion. And of course, Cobb was kind of asked about the statements that he made, and then of course, he replied with, "Oh no, trust me, McGahn's great. We love him." I'm paraphrasing, but just totally walking back the comments that he made, and the reporters overheard.
When the ship goes down, which I suspect it will, you're going to want to be able. If you're Ty Cobb, you're going to want to be able to say, "See, I told them they should have done that." There's a little self-preservation that's going on from everyone in this White House right now.
Well, certainly the message that Ty Cobb wants to get out is, hey, I want to release everything, and my guy's clean, right? So, but look, you guys make a very good argument. Perhaps it was deliberate, and as you say, maybe it's not as though it was like a perfect secret operation. It almost could be viewed as sort of another clunky way to release. So perhaps you're right.
The very, very worst argument that anyone can ever make is Don McGahn saying, I'm not doing this to preserve, I'm doing it to preserve the presidency going forward. As soon as you hear somebody say that, they're just completely full of it.
And that is the argument that Don McGahn is making.
Right, no, I mean, you read it, and he said it, and listen, he said he'd be weaken the White House long after Mr. Trump's tenure is over. There's no White House staffer who cares about the next president at all. This whole we have to care. I mean, I just don't believe that at all. I mean, yes, there are seasoned political professionals who respect the position and the glory of the White House.
Not a lot of them anything to do with this administration.
No, I was going to say, but if you really care, that's what I was going to. If you really cared about the White House going forward, you wouldn't have worked your ass off for a year and a half to get Donald Trump elected, which is what Don McGahn did. So that's just a crock.
And also keep in mind that some of these lawyers are now being called to testify. They have hired lawyers of their own in response to that. And so there's a ton of lawyers involved in what's going on. It's a little bit of a mess.
Watch the Young Turks commercial-free, download it or stream it, watch it any way you like at tytnetwork.com/join.